This picture might seem a bit unlikely. We assume that beef and biodiversity don't mix, that they have diametrically opposed agendas. Livestock grazing is about exploiting natural resources and can damage the soil and the vegetation. Whereas conservation is about protecting the environment away from human disturbances, for example in national parks. But we have a little problem here. While national parks are doing their best, they are just not big enough to protect the environment on their own. What about the areas we use for livestock grazing? Well, they're huge. 25% of Earth's land surface and over 50% of Australia. What if we could still use these vast areas to graze livestock, but manage them well to maintain or maximise native wildlife, to complement national parks? And what would this cost? Sure, we all like our red meat, but I'm sure most of us also want our unique Australian animals like the bilby, the frilled-neck lizard and the redback fairy wren to have a fair go. To investigate this further, we headed out to a tropical savanna in North Queensland where gum trees and wattles form an open woodland and cattle graze on native grasses. Here, a grazing trial's been running for 20 years. Through big wet seasons and through long droughts, a number of different grazing strategies were trialled side by side, and their performance was measured, including how profitable each of them were. Then we showed up, and for 3 years we ran around to all the different paddocks, catching as many skinks and geckos and snakes as we could find. Over 2,000 reptiles later, we started to get a really good idea how each of these grazing strategies were affecting the number and type of reptile that we caught. And what we found was that over the long term, where you had fewer cattle, you actually earned more money and there were more reptiles. Grazing less cattle was sustainable because you didn't damage the health of the ecosystem. The grass continued to grow and the cattle had food to eat. At the same time, the reptiles used the grass and leaf litter and little sticks on the ground as their habitat. Where there were lots of cattle, over 2 decades, they ate all the grass, they trampled the seedlings and they compacted the soil. With no grass for them left to eat, the cost of all the additional food that had to be brought in outweighed any money that was earned. At the same time, with less suitable habitat, we found fewer reptiles. So in fact, we found that there was not a trade-off between cattle and conservation. Sustainable grazing strategies were the most profitable and the most beneficial for reptiles. Consequently, the barman did not have to call in extra security on that fateful day. The Greenie and the Grazier sat down to a cold beer and a sustainably produced steak. Thank you.